Here's a quick snippet for ACC to SEC comparisons. The ACC championship game attendance was 53,808. Tennessee football regular season game attendance earlier this year, 72,730. Go Big Orange.
I just was playing because I love the game. Like, and it's scary to me.
It's really easy for the game to become a job.
Low six in his hands, whistle in his mouth.
Man, kids out there playing the game, staying out of trouble, competing. I love it.
How do we start this one? Has the Tennessee playoffs finished?
Yeah.
State champs were crowned?
Yeah.
Did one of them come from your district?
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was both teams in our district play each other.
We're in the championship game?
Both boarding schools for the 6th year in a row.
For the 6th year in a row?
Yep.
And, like, how much bigger than are they than y'all?
I couldn't tell you from a number perspective. But, I mean, they're a boarding school, and, you know, like almost every player is – not almost every player, but, like, I know the like, majority of Baylor's defensive players, I think 3 were from the state of Tennessee.
Nice.
And
good stuff.
The rest of them were Canada or Florida or something like that.
You got to love when a state championship is won by a bunch of immigrants.
Dude, yeah. Well, yeah, but it's also like Baylor shouldn't have lost. Like, people aren't, you know, who's listening, they're going to know this, but like Baylor, that's the best offensive unit I've ever seen in my life, ever, from an offensive perspective. Texas,
really?
Tennessee, not even close.
Like, are you saying the combination of personnel and coaching, or just personnel?
Personnel. Coaching's great too. I mean, the guy coached at South Carolina. I mean, he knows what he's doing. But like,
yeah, but like
the personnel. I mean, the coaching there is like it's top tier too. But like, dude, that personnel is different. I mean, you're averaging. They're probably 6'5" or 6'6" across the board up front. Majority of them P4. I think all of them are P4 except for one. Running back's committed to Ole Miss, but the backup running back, who's a sophomore, is exponentially better than him. He's the best sophomore I've ever seen in my life, and multiple college coaches have confirmed that. You got, I think, Ohio State commit receiver, Alabama commit receiver, a couple other receivers that are P4 as well, and then the quarterback who's a 3-star that's got Ole Miss offers and stuff like that. So, I mean, it's.
But you've seen, I mean, I'm not trying to downplay, right?
Yeah.
Like, you've seen offenses like that here.
Huh? Yeah.
And you still think that, like, I mean, you think that that's better than like 2018, 2019 Duncanville. You think that's better than current North Crowley. You think it's better than early 2000s, pick a year, Southlake.
I don't think you're talking about Duncanville and those type of teams, whom I have not played, but the speed is not the same. I mean, obviously Duncanville and your DeSotos and your North Crowleys are much faster, but like, these are college players. Like, they're ready to go right now, which is why
they're not college recruits. They're college players. They're on the campus freshmen, like contemplated reclassifying.
And some of them
they're that level.
You know, yeah, some of them have already they changed the role, but some of them have already graduated from Canada. Because Canada's on a different scale.
Yeah, secondary system.
Yeah, so they've already graduated. That's been the cheat code, and then come over here for their last year.
Well, yeah, because if you're going to a boarding school, then you're like 19 or 20.
Yeah, so like, dude, I mean, when they make some of our biggest recruits, like Chauncey Gooden, who is, you know, whatever, 50 offers, committed to Colorado, is going to early enroll. When they make him look small, and he's not a 6'5" guy. I think he's like 6'3.5". 6'4", I think he's 358, 360. When they make him look tiny, like across the board, the offensive line, it's like, my God. And those guys up front are not your 6'6", you know, 285 sloppy. That's what I'm saying. Like, they're a college like a type of player where it's like, oh my God, you have a meal plan, you've got a trainer. That's a boarding school, and you can see the difference. Which is why, again, for 6 straight years, a boarding school has won the state championship, whether it's Macaulay, who won this year, or Baylor. It's different.
And that, to me, is like not to like toot our own horn, but that to me is like what makes public school, like especially here in Texas, like what makes public school like playoff competition so much better. Because you know, you hear it's private school. Private schools run the state of California, right? And private schools, it sounds like, run the state of Tennessee. And I know that there's a lot more states, and I know that there's a lot more but when you look at places like hotbeds for like elite talent, the ones that are still committed to like the public school version of like high school competition, it's like Texas and Ohio and maybe like Georgia.
Yep.
But and to me, that's way more beneficial than like, it's just who can, it's like John Paul II on the north side of Dallas. They went like 0-10, and then they hired former Dallas Cowboys safety, the guy that hit T.O. when he stood on the star. Can't remember his name. They hire him, and in his first year, he's playing in the state championship. And it's like, don't see any returning starters, that's for sure.
Yeah, correct.
And like, I don't know. It just, to me, it kind of like, you still got to work, you still got to win, you still got to do all those things, you got to develop the kids. But like, I don't know. It just, to me, it kind of takes away some of the like mystique of it by winning a state championship that way. But what do I know? I don't have one. So
no, I agree. I do think it takes away the purity of some of the game in a sense. Cause like, when you're looking, like I'm looking at those kids at Baylor that we played, and it's like, well, obviously like these kids didn't go to Baylor because they were excited about the academia part of it. You know what I mean? Like these people made a conscious decision to go to a school. It's going to, basically an IMG. It's going to get them ready right now to go play at the next level. And when you have kids that are making that drastic of a decision, obviously like that's just a different level to me, compared
and
to
like
grew up there and went there. And now I'm not saying that because of that, they're more talented. Again, like I do think that you take some of your Duncanvilles or you take some of those teams, and I think it'd be a great game. I'm just saying that the mental fortitude and the vision and the purpose as to why these kids are there, there's been a lot of like mature thought process to it as to here's why we're going to go there. We're football and we're going to be great at football. And yeah, we'll get through the academics. We'll be good at that as well. But you're talking about a bunch of mature kids that are making that decision.
And I feel like it's got to hurt the everything else that comes with like high school sports, high school football, high school volleyball, high school basketball. It's got to, like, these kids aren't, they're there for maybe a year, 18 months, maybe 2, who knows? But like, they're not, their parents aren't building a float in the homecoming parade. They're not working the concession stand. Like,
right.
There's a legit chance that their parents only get to see 1 or 2 games a year because they live in a different country or state. And to me, that just takes away a little bit of it. Now, let me make this abundantly clear. The process and development and having a plan and sticking to it and executing that plan, I am all about it.
Yeah.
But when you start calling things like that, and we had this conversation offline, like when you start calling things like that state champions and not all-star games, I don't know. Are you though? How many of you have been in Tennessee for more than 3 years? Raise your hand, right? Like that's just how I view it. And that's coming from a place of only coached in one state and only coached public school. So take that for what it's worth. But I don't know.
I agree with that. I think anybody coming from Texas is going to kind of have that same thought process ingrained in their subconscious where it's like, no, pure football, where the kid that I'm playing next to, I remember how he played in Pee Wee. Like I think that's pretty special.
So staying on the high school level, this goes on across the country. Like this is not unique to Texas, but I think it's something that I'm curious to hear your feedback on because, social media runs the world when it comes to the next generation, when it comes to teenagers, and the TikTok trash talk after winning games, has become what I would seriously consider on the verge of being an epidemic. You know, we had the BTA trend that came up mid-season, and there was like 3 or 4 schools in Texas that had kids do it, and they got suspended for like a game or two, or like a fight broke out after, or both. And then there's these others who guys are, you know, they got their boys running down onto the field after the game with their phones so they can record a video, you know, trashing the other team that they just beat and this, that, and the other. And what those videos, you know, encourage is some sort of clapback after you do it, right? So if you ever do lose, you know, here comes your slice of humble pie via social media. And it comes in all shapes and sizes. It can be, you know, making fun of whatever videos they've made before about kids, or, you know, when it comes to playoffs, like, oh, go air up your basketballs type thing. But I mean, I've also seen ones, I don't know where it was, but these kids were, you know, they got their huddle sideline set up and they're watching SpongeBob in the middle of the game on the sideline.
Are you serious?
Hand to God. And so I'm just curious what your feedback, your input is. And like, cause trust me, I've been on both sides.
Yeah.
I've been on the lighthearted fun side of a blowout, and I've been on the contemplation, what are we doing side of a blowout. And I've seen kids, you know, start to go down a path of not handling it the right way, behaving the right way. You know, the kids want to put on the headsets. They want to wear the sideline jackets. They want to, you know, can I take my shoulder pads off? And it's just manifested into all this other stuff. I'm just curious I have my thoughts, and I'm more than happy to share them. I'm just curious what yours are.
I was at a birthday party yesterday for a girl down the street that my 3-year-old is friends with. Our parenting styles are very different. And so we're at this birthday party in the backyard. We have a tree, and there's a bird's nest sitting pretty low. A group of girls from these other parents were trying to pull the nest down. And I said, hey, do not do that. And I explained why. The birds have a home. What are you doing? Y'all are basically little psychos. Whatever, okay? Here's the difference, all right? Those other girls proceeded to do it. I look at my daughter, and she's just staring at me, sees me look at her, and she walks away. She goes and gets a scooter, and she plays by herself until they finish doing her thing. And then she goes back and plays with them once they're done. Moral of the story is there has been discipline set within my daughter that she knows, like, when I say no, that is the expectation. And if you do different, it ain't going to be good. Point being, I do think that Nick Saban's players had a little bit of like second subconscious thought going on in their brain. Like, bro, if we do this, we're about to get ripped. Because on the other hand, then you have the Ryan Day that's just standing there watching his team go defend and whatever. I mean, we can get on the whole thing about the flag planting and whatever. That's a whole different conversation. But I think that Saban would have not just stood there and just watched his players do it. And so I think that, you know, you want to be revered and respected and also somewhat feared as a head coach. And I think that falls on you. Like, you have to address those things and at least put it into their brain and plant the seed of like, why is this not good? Why would this be a stupid decision? What are the consequences? And are they still going to do it sometimes? Yeah. And I think that you got to be smart as a coach to make sure that you set the tone. When that screwed up one time, they'll never do it again. But I think a lot of it comes back on the coach. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but I think that you got to have enough control where it's like, no, this is my team, and they're at least going to have an idea of why it's wrong.
Yeah, no, I think in this day and age, I think it's a fine line, though. I think that's the hard part is like,
yeah,
if you think that, let's just get this out of the way. If you think TK didn't talk trash in high school, you're insane.
Yeah.
If you think I didn't talk trash in high school, you're equally insane.
Yeah.
The difference is that time and place was a huge factor, you know, and the style in which you did it was a huge factor. Like the guys going, I mean, look at Sark after the A&M game. Guys start trying to stand on the logo, tear it up. He goes sprinting out there like, hey, we're not going to act like that, blah, blah, blah. And like, boom. That's all it took. There wasn't like a lot of pushback. They bailed because they respect their coach.
Yep.
But the trickle down into the high school ranks, right? Like pros have been pros. Chad Johnson was mailing bottles of Pepto-Bismol to the Cleveland Browns in 2006. Like this is not like these things are not new, right? But the audacity of teenagers to think that like, okay, cool. Listen, I need you to understand something. At no point in time what I'm about to say am I condoning. I'm just making you aware of the reality. Cool. You want to make that video and you want to call out this guy, that guy, because you beat them or whatever. If that dude walks up to you and drops you like a sack of potatoes, you have to accept that those are the consequences of your actions.
Right.
And, you know, Mike Tyson said there's a lot of people in the world who operate a certain way because they've never had the fear of getting hit in the face. And again, I'm not condoning that behavior, but I can't control everybody in the world.
Yeah.
And then the flip side of that is you better make sure if this is not as a coach speaking, this is just words to players, words to athletes. You better make sure if you're going to act like that, if you're going to dish it out, you better be able to take it.
That's right.
So I don't love it by any means. I think that there's a time and place to celebrate and enjoy those things. And you're going to have moments, especially in heated games, playoff games, rivalry games. And I'm not going to sit here and pretend like, you know, we won a big game and I haven't jumped around and danced and celebrated and hooped and hollered with our players. I think that is, you know, two completely different things. But like you said, there's got to be, at the end of the day, there's only one captain of this ship. And if the captain of that ship is cool with it, I mean, there's not much you can say. But just understand, the captain of the ship is cool with it. There's all these ripple effects, right? There's consequences to those actions, and there's secondary behaviors, and there's secondary issues that can come along with that stuff. And if that stuff is going to exist, if you're going to allow that stuff to exist on that level, you also, as the head coach, as the leader, you have to accept the consequences of letting your players behave that way.
Yep.
And what that could look like is you lose control of the locker room, or one of your best players or one of your worst players gets jumped at the Dairy Queen after the game and he's out for a couple weeks because he shot his mouth off on Twitter or TikTok or Instagram, whatever it is. And it's one of those things, like, I think you and I lived in a very unique time because the introduction of like quote unquote social media happened while we were in that phase, that like late teen, early 20s. And we operated as if there were no repercussions to these actions because no one had ever created anything like this. But they've been around Facebook's been around for almost 20 years now. And Twitter is not far behind. And there's been prime examples over and over and over of there being repercussions for social media actions. And I just don't understand how you don't address it in some type of way. Like this dude from Alito has been making these all year. And let me get this up out front. Alito has built a flagship of a dynasty. They got like 11 state championships. It's absurd. 9, something, something ridiculous in the last like 18, 20 years. Flagship of a program. I'm not letting one of my kids do that over and over and over because of how it reflects on the other 75, 80 kids in the program. You're good enough. Yeah. Sure, you're going to get away with it most of the time. But is that, I don't know. I just feel like there's a certain level of humility that every kid needs to be willing to take, you know, as they grow and mature. But
yeah, it's one thing that Coach Lee would always talk about, and this is more for like in play. It's not necessarily like social media, but it was to the edge and never over. And so like the preaching, obviously, hey, to the edge, never what, over, to the edge, never what, over. And he did a really good job of, whether it was in practice or in a game, and then having to reflect on it on Sunday, of like showing the video or whatever and saying, okay, like I love passion, I love energy and trash talk. Like that's part of it. But you have to have enough awareness to push it always. Like I think it's important to push things to the edge, but you have to have enough awareness to where you're never over the edge. Because once you're over, you're becoming now selfish, and you're going to affect the team. And I think that's like a big like preaching point that kids have to understand. And even at the college level, like you have to teach these kids like they're 12 years old. Like you're going to have to, like, you get what you emphasize. And if you address it one time, like it's never going to have, it's not good enough. Like if it's a problem, you're going to have to address it over and over and over again, to where like they know it like the back of their hand, and they know what the edge is, and they know what over is. And then like, I think if that's your job as a coach. And if you're not teaching that, like, and you're just teaching football, that's a problem, because like that's a life lesson in my opinion as well.
That was a huge learning curve for me year 1 to year 2. I genuinely operated under the impression that like, okay, if I address this and I say it one time, like we're good. And that was with anything. It's like, what time are meetings? What time are weights? What time, like,
Yeah.
hey, don't do that. Right? Like, hey, turn your grader checks in by Friday. Like all of those things. Like, okay, well, I said it. Why didn't you do it? And that re-emphasis was something that had to become part of the repertoire. But like, I can't stand, to me, I think it's very easy for like those expectations, those behaviors are set by extremely talented groups of individuals, teams, whatever you want to call them, right? So their ability to get away with it with no major repercussions is pretty consistent, because like, what, you don't want us to do it. What did they say? Like Baker Mayfield said, like, you don't want somebody planting the flag, like don't let them win on your home field. Right. Cool. I get that. Like, and I understand it. And when Baker did it at Ohio State, what was that, like 6 or 7 years ago? To me, that was completely different. Right. Yeah. Now it's become like, that's, guys are trying to win the game so they can do that. They're not trying to win the game because they love the game. Right. They're trying to do it so they get the opportunity to embarrass somebody.
That's right.
And the to the edge, not over, has got to be like, whatever your edge is, it better be clear and explicit. Like it better be drawn out. It better be understood in the back of every locker that this is the line, and if you cross it, there will be major consequences.
Correct.
And whatever that line is, within reason, whatever that line is, if the players respect that line because you've emphasized it, because they respect you, because they follow you, then you won't have any of these negative consequences and repercussions that we're talking about. You might have one or two like random one-off, like that guy's on his own, he's a cancer, blah, 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 blah. But if you set that expectation, you set that line, and you re-emphasize it, and the players are bought in and they push that line, but they never cross it, then this is all a moot point. But a lot of these behaviors are coming because that line's not clear. And that line's not, I think some of the problem is that line's not clear because kids are finding different and unique ways to make fun of people, right? Yep. To embarrass their opponent once they win. And so you've got to constantly not change the line, but evolve your interpretation of the line to encompass as much of this stuff as possible. Yep. And like I said, there are conversations, time and place, closed door, no phones, all those things that occur and exist that still allow for certain aspects of that environment. But the problem with the environment that it allows them in is that it's not giving a specific kid clout. It's bringing the team together. And that's what some of these kids don't like or want or understand, is that trust me, I'm not against like bagging on your your opponent with your teammates. Like I'm not against that at all. Like if you think that I haven't sat in a meeting room and listened to all of us be like, that kid sucks. He can't backpedal. He plays too high. He doesn't want to tackle. His hips are stiff. He can't change. If you think that that's never occurred, you're insane. And if you think that after all of those prophecies were fulfilled and he did suck and he couldn't cover us, and, Terrence Williams had 220 on him and a couple touchdowns. Like if you think that we didn't go back and be like, I told y'all that kid sucked. He couldn't do this and he's trash and he's never going to play football again, blah, 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 whatever the conversations was, you're insane. But the difference is that we were having that conversation as a team. And we weren't trying to say, hey, look at me and look how smart I was. It was saying like, we know these kids suck because they don't work like we do. But we're saying it to each other together, not by myself over here so everybody else can hear me and see me. And I think that that's the tricky, the unique navigation that head coaches and position coaches and coordinators, that coaches in general are having to do right now because of where we are in the social media crossover into sports.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Totally agree.
All right. Well, specifically the college ranks, the college football brackets are set. First round, we got Texas hosting Clemson, Ohio State hosting Tennessee, Penn State hosting SMU, and Notre Dame hosting Indiana. Arizona State, Oregon, Boise State, and Georgia all got byes to the quarterfinals. Any of those that you disagree with?
Well, I think Texas has that's a good path right there.
I do too. I think that's a really good path for them.
Yeah. And I'll make a statement that obviously everybody's going to probably get upset with, but like I get principally why SMU is in the playoff. Like I get it. And I agree. Like if you're the committee, it's like, okay, here we go. We got 12 teams. Here's how many losses they have compared to the first team out being Bama. It's got to be SMU. I get that. And now I'm going to be biased coming from coaching in the SEC, but anybody that thinks that the ACC is comparable in general to the SEC is insane. So I think the right thing to do is to put SMU in there. My point being, would I have been upset if Bama got in? No, because I guarantee you there's teams in that bracket. And like I could be wrong and watch SMU win the whole thing and I'll be like, hey, I was completely wrong. But I bet there are teams that are like, glad SMU got in and not Bama. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's there's two ways to approach this conversation. And you kind of touched on both of them. The more resume deserving team is SMU.
Correct.
The eye test potential would have been Bama.
100%.
And everybody understands that.
Yeah.
But that's, to me, that's like any guy that finishes second for a head job.
Yeah.
And that team, whatever program it was, that team goes, 1-9, 2-8. And they're like, could have done better than that. And it's like, right. But for whatever reason, what was on your paper didn't make them feel that way. Right. And it wasn't good enough for you to get the keys to prove that you could. And with the pool expanding to 12 teams, I think it's just really, you have to just accept the results. If you're 11-1 and you don't make it, if you're 10-2 and you don't make it, you probably, have an argument.
Yeah.
But if you're 9-3, it's just, do you know that you're better than some of the teams in there? Sure. But you didn't do what you're supposed to, so you don't get the opportunity to prove it. Now, I will also say, if SMU doesn't come back and make that game close and, push it to the limit with Clemson, if they get blown out by 13, I say blown out. If they lose by double digits, Bama's in and they don't make it.
Correct.
And, Dabo even said it after the game. He said, if you think that that's not a playoff team that we just competed against, you're crazy. Right. And Dabo's obviously saying that because he's trying to raise the, the light on, one of their big wins of the year against SMU. But I just think that I don't think, to be completely honest, I don't think that the fourth best team of any conference should have an argument in or out because they're not winning the national championship. The fourth best team in the Big Ten was Indiana, and they made it, and they ain't winning the national championship. And he's done a phenomenal job, and they are a completely different team than they were last year. But if they wouldn't have made it in for, I don't know, pick a team, Army, who's 11-1. Just saying. Just won a conference championship. Just saying. If Indiana wouldn't have made it in, too bad. Don't get fourth.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
that's my interpretation of it. And I think this is why I love the 12-team system. This is why I would have loved an 8-team system or whatever it would have been. When you limited it to 4, it's really easy to be like that first guy out and be like, this is stupid. We should be in, blah, blah, blah. Like we got screwed because of some computer analytics, all these things. But I also think, and something I want to get your opinion on, I think that there's a little bit of a buy-in issue at Bama. I think that guys are on the ship, but they ain't rowing.
Yep.
Because I heard a former UW coach. I heard a former UW player saying that like when DeBoer took over at Washington, they were trash, and the kids knew it. So whatever he said, they were all in. Like, guys, we're gonna be a top 10, top 5 team in 2-3 years, whatever. Do everything I say, and we'll be there. And they did it. They were all in. And he was like, I watch Bama games now, and those kids aren't like that.
Yeah.
And I can tell by their mannerisms, their body language, how they finish plays. Like, they're good. They're good athletes. They're good players, but they're not all in. Right.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's pretty tough to follow up Nick Saban. I mean, it's I can see that. And I would agree with that statement. And I'll go back to, again, do I think SMU should have got in? Yes. I think it's funny because, like, any team in that bracket, including Texas and including Georgia, if it would have been Bama or even South Carolina, who's crazy talented, every team would have been like, oh, shoot. Like yeah. Compared to an SMU. Again, like, I could be wrong here, and SMU is going to go ball out and win, and I'll quit coaching. But, again, it's just, SMU deserved to get in, and I hope they do great. But it's also like, I don't know, you put them against South Carolina or Bama. I really think South Carolina. I don't think it's going to be very pretty. So, but yeah, to your point of Alabama, I don't think they're all bought in. I mean, you can see it from the very beginning of the year. When you're seeing a team do this all the time with that much talent, like, obviously there's some division somewhere. People are being siloed, and there's internal resistance somewhere, and internal resistance will always end up being exposed externally, and you can see it.
Which is such a weird phenomenon, right? Because, like, objectively, if you look at it from like an analytical standpoint, if you look at it from, just 10,000 feet objectively, DeBoer is clearly a good coach.
Yeah.
Bama is clearly a talented roster. This is why sports matter. This is why, like, competition and, like, actually playing out the games matter, because for whatever reason, this highly talented coaching staff and this highly talented roster is not producing a consistently elite result. And it doesn't make any sense. But then you turn around and you look at a Boise State, or you look at an SMU, or you look at Dabo and the criticisms he's taken in the NIL era.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, rosters that are not as talented as them are consistently producing better results. Why? And it's the human element. It's the cultural. And I hate that word so much, because in the last decade, it's been watered down and packaged and sold online in, program guides and clinics and this and that. But the fact of the matter is, the root of the word, an environment that produces a specific result, right, is so important that if it's not genuine and it's not everybody rowing in the same direction, it's not going to be successful. Which is also caveat to that. The one time that it ever was the national championship Florida Gators that had, murderers, drug dealers, missionaries, and thieves on it, right? That's the exception, not the rule, where they were just so good, so much better than everybody that they were able to cancel out everything. But when you look at it, happens at all levels. Texas high school playoffs, I think there was 11 teams that were a 3 or a 4 seed that made it to the 4th round. What?
Yeah. Right.
Like,
Well, I mean, and somebody, I can't remember who just said this. I don't know if it was Saban, and he's going to be an SEC bias, and so am I until I die.
you're full of SEC bias, just by the way.
Well, yeah, I saw the difference in it personally, and it's just unbelievable. But like, how many of these teams, SMU, Clemson, played a championship type of like caliber game week in and week out, and some of those, their first championship game was yesterday. In the SEC, it's every week, and like that itself takes a toll on your team mentally, physically, emotionally. Like it beats you up, and like again, I think that's why it's the argument is always going to be there, where it's like somebody can make an argument for the worst team in the SEC should be able to be in the playoff instead of SMU or something like that. Like that's always going to be the argument, but there is validity to, I think, the caliber of play week in and week out in the SEC compared to non-SEC conferences.
I mean, I think that's, Sark said that on game day. He said, we had to play one SEC game last year and it was against Bama. And it was really easy for our kids to get up and get juiced and have the emotional, fortitude and the, physically to be ready to play that game. When you got to do it 8 times in a season, it wears on you. And it's so crazy because you'll see a kid that, March to July, man, they love football. They loved it. Man, I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do this. I want to do that. And we're not even talking just specifically about the SEC anymore. And it begins to get like mid to late October. Yeah. And you see a kid who said all these things that he wanted to do. And not only did he say them, but then he, for the most part, did the things necessary to accomplish them. And it's week 8. And he's like, oh, God, we got weights in the morning, man. It's like, how long's practice at? And they start asking all those like selling questions, not buying questions. And that's where really good coaches have to be able to push through that, whatever it looks like, right? There's not a piece of paper somebody can hand you and be like, hey, when you start to see this going through your locker room, sit them down, ask these questions. It'll solve all your problems. You'll be rejuvenated. Right. You'll go out and take care of business. Right. But that, to me, that's where good coaches are made. Like the vast majority of teams are going to hit that, right? It's really, really special groups that never. I watched Ray Gates post game after they dismantled Allen, which North Crowley is just, they're a different animal, man. I don't.
Yeah.
But he kept telling him, he's like, I know you're going to be tired, and I know you're going to be sore, and I know you're going to want to sleep in, and you're going to want to do this, and you're going to skip class so you can, go get something to eat. But you got to put the team first, and you have to be willing to continue to do these hard things because we're so close. We've earned the right to practice one more week, and now it resets to 0, and we have to go earn the right to do it again.
Yep. And
it's so difficult to get it, like, objectively, to just sit in a room and be like, hey, if we do all these things, we're going to play till mid-December, and it's going to be awesome. We're going to have a chance to go win a state championship. And it's really easy for kids June, July to August to be like, no problem. I'm all about it.
Yeah.
It's really hard for them to, when they're in that point where they've played a Thursday game or a Friday game and they got to get ready for a Thursday game, right? Or they played 2 top 10 opponents back-to-back weeks and they're a little bit more sore, right? And somebody got hurt that's really good for the team. And all these factors start to come in, and like, their girlfriend broke up with them, and like all these other factors come in. It's really hard to convince a kid that's not fully developed mentally to be like, no, you got to push through that. There is no personal time. Personal time's selfish right now. It's all team first, team first, team first. Not about me. It's not about you. It's about us. And I think that's where the separation between, like, when you look at high level football, whether it's college, SEC versus like Big 12 ACC, or if you look at like 6A versus 2A, those type of comparisons, like you've got to be willing to, you've got to find a way to push your kids through that. And you've got to find a way and be willing to push through it yourself.
Yeah. I think it's, what Coach Lee always did a really good job of is like the implementation of your process every single day is very, very important. And you almost have to be maniacal about it as a head coach and laying out the process for your players. It's like they know that Monday, here's our routine. Tuesday, here's a routine, to where like they know it so well it's very, very boring to them. But they also have to understand that the boring routine is what sets the foundation for long-term success. And like what the head coach's job is once you've got that process to where they are basically robots, and we know Monday, here we go. Now it's head coach's job to cultivate electricity to like amp up, the energy in the room, and to do that on a weekly basis. So like you have this steady process of what your kids are doing every week. So now like that never changes and they're good. And once they have that, you feel good as a head coach. And then it's your job to like, ignite the fire, boom, each week. And that's where, to me, like as a head coach, like who's your person on staff who always does a really good job of getting the pulse of the team, where they're at. Hey, this is where they're at this week. Here's what we need. Here's your point of emphasis. Let's go. And I think if you do that weekly, like that is your job as a head coach. So there is a consistent process, and there's boredom in that process, but then you are what provide the spark for each week. No matter how that may be, it's your job to fill in that blank. I thought Coach Lee always did a really good job of that, because if there is that process, and like at least now, like you're never going to have full control of anything, even though we want to as a head coach. Like yours never control. That is a dictatorship type of thought and narcissistic thought of all coaches. You don't have control, but if you can provide that process and you provide the energy for that, like that is your job as a coach.
I heard Coach Kaz say a few years ago, he's like, monotony is hard, especially for an 18, 19, 20-year-old person.
Yeah.
Like monotony is extreme, but monotony is hard in real life too, right? Like that's the fear of a job. You get into something that you're not absolutely passionate about, you don't absolutely love, and like you got to wake up every day, go do it, come home, take care of your personal responsibilities. You got to do all those things. And it's, Dino Babers told me many, many times over 3.5 years, consistently good, not occasionally great.
Yep.
Consistently good, not occasionally great. If you'll be consistently good and not occasionally great, I can trust you. You'll find a way to play. We'll be a better football team. We'll accomplish things people don't think we're capable of. But if you're occasionally great, we're going to upset a really good team, but we're going to fail to meet our personal goals because we didn't show up with the same level of effort and intensity and discipline every day. And however you package those things to get kids bought into them, I think that's the secret to success, right? That's how do you bottle that up and distribute it to your locker room? How do you get them to fall in love with monotony? And how do you get them to understand something that a lot of adults don't understand in that consistency and the value of it? So
True.
Pivoting from that though, I know this is especially the college ranks, it's a unique time of year. I think it's the beginning of a much longer process at the high school level, but I think that, at the college level, things happen faster and decisions have to be made faster. So it begins a unique time of year. The closed door hallways, I believe, is how you describe them, if you want to paint that picture for everybody.
Yeah. So my first year coaching at the college level, you have like your offensive hallway and your defensive hallway, and the doors are always open unless you're having a meeting with a coach or a player. And I found it pretty funny, and it's not like this is like specific to Vanderbilt. It's everywhere. Like
yeah, it's universal.
It is. Yeah. I just found it funny. It's like this time of the year, I was, I'm going down to get my coffee and noticing like all the doors shut. And I'm looking, I'm like, well, there's no player in there, and there's no coach in there. Just one coach. He's on his phone. He's kind of like looking around and, head down talking. And I walk by and he's making sure it's like not the head, not the head coach. And it's like there's a lot more closed door conversations that are happening this time of the year, whether it's the coaches are on the phone with their agents, uh, or another school, and just trying to be, very low key about it. Because to your point, this time of the year, like, dude, it is so cutthroat at the college level. I mean, I saw it happen. It is like boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden, like within 2 hours, like what just happened to half our staff? Like that's just part of it, at this level. And coaches know that. And so if you're part of a staff that just went from being average and all of a sudden this year you were great, you're now having to make the decision. Do I want to use this year as a launching year for myself because we just went from being average to great? This is my chance to go boom and go somewhere else. Or do I want to stay, take the risk of maybe being good again or not good, and all of a sudden now I don't have the opportunity to go get that job I want? That's kind of where you're at in the college world, especially now with all the changes that are being made. And so, and you have the young coaches that are, hey, it's my time to not be a GA anymore. I want to be a QC. And hey, it's not my time to be a QC anymore. I want to be an OC, but I can't be an OC because I can't get elevated as long as this OC is here. I'm going somewhere else. So like there's so many of those conversations happening where you're seeing a coach walk in, open the door, shut it behind them, get on the phone, talk. And it's just like, dude, should I be on the phone right now? Like, I don't know what to do right now.
Yeah, those turnaround programs, like that's you have to expect that as a coach. Like you got to expect that all your guys are getting phone calls, right? Because we just went somewhere where nobody thought we could win. We won, right? And the average age of my staff is 36.
Yeah.
They're looking for opportunities to grow, and other coaches are looking. They're trying to steal a little bit of the magic that we bottled here, and but it's a double-edged sword, right? Like you, as a head coach, you should promote those conversations, right?
Right.
Grow your tree, like expand those limbs, get as many guys out there at different levels that you've fostered relationships with. You've had a little bit part into their growth, their maturation, and their ability to go get that opportunity. I think that man, I listened to a really funny story about this time of year. It's called like Siski and something. It's the former like college coach and a radio guy, and they do like a podcast, and they're really good. But he was working for Hugh Freeze, and Saban called him, but Hugh's sitting in his office, and they're like talking about recruits and like, hey, we got this kid coming in, blah blah blah, and he's like, Tuscaloosa, like, why is this area coach? Because he's from Alabama, and he's like, why is Tuscaloosa calling me? And he answers the phone. And he's like, hey, coach, this is Nick. And he's like, Nick who? And he's like, it's Coach Saban. And Hugh's sitting there. And he had seen it. And he was like, hey, put it on speaker. I want to hear who it is. And so it's sitting on speakerphone right in front of him. And he's sitting there with his head coach. He's like, well, hey, Coach Saban, what can I do for you? And he's like, well, we've been watching and, seeing some things we're doing. I think we got a spot for you. And he was like, a spot? He's like, yeah, a coaching spot. And he said, without missing a beat, Hugh looked at him and said, make sure you ask for enough money. Cause like he knew, like it's a wrap. He goes, but yeah, I got offered a job in front of my head coach. And I think that's a really fun, like that's a lighthearted story, but I think that's a good way to handle it. But I think if you're a head coach that's in those situations, like obviously you don't want to be kicking guys out the door, but I never, when I got into this and I knew I wanted to be a head coach, I never wanted to be the head coach that guys were afraid to tell me that they were leaving to go explore another opportunity. As long as I didn't feel like it was a regression.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and that's all things considered. Hey, we're going, I'm going to take this job because it puts me, 15 minutes from my grandparents who live on 150 acres and they're getting older and they need help. Like, as long as all the factors looked at, work-life balance, growth type of opportunity, as long as it's not just a guy that like I feel like I've invested a bunch into and is bought in and it's just like, hey, I'm going over here to do the exact same thing for the same amount of money, just in a different color. You know, I never wanted to be a head coach that guys were hesitant to have those conversations.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think if you're not that guy and they feel comfortable, like you have a better chance of having retention, obviously, because it's not many coaches are that way. And so it's, you know, when you're working under a coach, it's like, you know, that you revere and you want to be with. It's hard to take those jobs because you don't get that a lot. So, yeah, I think that's how it should be. Even though it's always hard to go to your head coach and be like, hey, man, I'm going to take this job. Like no matter who the head coach is, it's always going to be tough. But yeah, it's probably even tougher whenever it is a coach that you revere and you don't want to leave, but it's part of it.
I had a pretty transparent last probably 4 or 5 years with Coach Elliott in that regard. Like, especially when I became an offense coordinator, and it was, you know, hey, every offseason I'm gonna interview. Maybe once, maybe 3 times. I don't know. I'm not just going to drive around the state and be gone once a week, but you know, I'm going to go through that process and I'm going to let you know. And I hope that you can respect that. And I felt like he always did. And I felt like it was always handled the way it needed to be handled. And, you know, I think that was twofold. I think that, you know, I had proved my loyalty to the program and to him and what we were invested in. And he wanted me to be able to pursue those dreams. And I also think that he felt really confident about the staff that he had built, you know, there in the future.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't like, I never felt like a guy that was like, as cool as it would have been, I never felt like a guy that Coach Elliott looked at like, if he's not calling plays, we're going to be screwed, you know?
Yeah.
And I don't think I'll ever feel that way. And that's okay. It would be a cool feeling, but I don't think I ever will. But I think that it made it a lot easier to go have those conversations, and it made it a lot easier to go pursue those jobs because I'm going in not having to like look over my shoulder and make sure that like nobody saw me pull into this admin building that I know somebody and like say something and that's you know, they always have that little box on application that says, can we contact your employer? And it's like, I never had to worry about clicking, you know, do I click no? And then somebody does tell him and he's like, why didn't you tell me about this? So
yeah, that's a really good point.